Hey guys, this is Dr. Mike Wuming. Welcome to another edition of Bootstrap MD. This is a podcast for physician and healthcare entrepreneurs. And super excited. We've got not one, but two guests on the program today. I know you guys have been asking questions about how long to have the podcast, how to get started. I wanted to bring the experts here, and we actually, spoiler alert, we actually collaborating together to provide a new service, a new community that we're trying to build to help other physicians start up their own podcast. So we have on the call Dr. Bradley Block and Dr. Jimmy Turner. How are you guys doing?
Great. Thanks so much. Excited to be here.
Yeah, doing well, Mike. Thanks for having us.
All right. So just we were just chatting about podcasts just before we got on the call. But before we get started, maybe you guys can give us a brief, and Bradley, brief history about yourself, a little bio about yourself. I know went on ChatGPT to see what ChatGPT says, but I want to hear it from you. Tell us about yourself and just go from there.
So I'm a private practice otolaryngologist on Long Island, and I've been in the podcasting space for, 6 years now, a little more. And my podcast, Physicians Got Doctoring, is a personal and professional development show, but really aspects of the physician life in general are explored anywhere from personal finance to starting a business to networking, which is what you and I talked about, to things that we encounter in the exam room, irrespective of what type of physician you are. So it really runs the gamut, and I've been enjoying it. I love podcasting. It's how I met you. It's how I met Jimmy. And it's the reason that we're creating this.
Awesome. And we're going to get into what we're creating in just a moment. Jimmy, please introduce yourself too.
Sure. I'm Jimmy Turner, and I am actually an academic anesthesiologist at Wake Forest, North Carolina. But in my other alter ego life, I teach personal finance to physicians and have done that for 7 years. Started out the physician philosopher, and now at Money Meets Medicine, where I host a podcast on exactly that topic, where we're all about financial literacy so we can empower physicians to practice because they want to, not because they have to. And yeah, I have loved doing this. It turns out that I'm much better at podcasting than spelling because I started out as a blogger. And so I think I made the right choice in getting behind a microphone, but that's still left to be determined.
At least you didn't spell your name wrong, which I initially did to get onto the podcast. We had to put our names on here. I spelled mine M-I-K. So obviously you're one up with me there. Maybe before we get started on the services, the community that we're building, maybe talk about your journey into starting a podcast. Bradley, what was it for you?
So it's funny. Jimmy said he started off as a blogger and became a podcaster. I started off thinking about being a blogger, but just sitting down and typing the prospect of it was so onerous. Whereas with podcasting, I had questions about the practice of medicine. It was mainly, the start of it was I had questions about how to navigate the doctor-patient interaction, right? The communication. And there were all these experts out there who were helping people communicate in the boardroom, in sales, in dating, but there wasn't a lot out there for physicians. And so I wanted a way to get experts in front of me in communication to be able to ask them these very specific questions about our types of interactions. And so instead of just calling up strangers and asking them questions, I had to have an excuse to call. So I needed a podcast so that I could reach out to experts that I had no connection to and ask them those questions. And so that was the impetus for creating the podcast. And then from there, the topics just exploded because it wasn't just about doctor-patient interaction, because I had lots of other questions about just life in general, but all through the lens of being a physician. So that's how the topics changed. And it's been a great journey. And my network is fantastic. Again, that's how I met you guys. So that was my introduction. But there were a lot of pain points along the way. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that and say that one of the fringe benefits of podcasting has been getting to know other people and being able to interview people that I wouldn't ordinarily run across in my everyday life. And that's not why I set out to do this, but ultimately it became that. And I did start out as a blogger. I wrote 3 posts a week for 3 years. And I don't know how many thousands of words that I've written and how many more I've spelled wrong. But it was the beginning, and started there, joined the White Coat Investor Network as one of the 4 originally partners. And then the podcast grew and took off. And so I started focusing on that instead. And here we are. But I agree with Brad. Podcasting and having the opportunity to explore ideas with other people and building a community has been something that I didn't really expect from podcasting, but turns out is a part of what this is, which is highly enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think it is for me, and I've spoken this on previous episodes of like why I started a podcast. But as some is, I've been working with doctors starting up their own businesses in the entrepreneur route, and I'm not a great writer. I think in terms of blogging, I'll have writer's block as soon as I try to put up a post. But I can talk. I can talk for days, and I'll stumble over my words just like as I'm doing now. But it allowed me to create content. And we all know if you're starting up your own business, for me, it was marketing my coaching practice, my coaching business is I can create content by not only talking, but then also, as you say, getting access to experts to coming on who want to get in touch with my audience and just have it grow. And we all have had, let's talk about it. We'll do a little contest. Bradley, how many episodes do you have?
A little over 400.
400. Jimmy?
I think on December 17th will be the 200th episode.
200. So I'm around 278. So Brad, you win.
That's right.
We're going to give you an award at the end of this. Whew. So let's talk about podcasts. And obviously we're a bit biased. We just, at the time of this recording, we just got over an election. And one of the ways that one of the candidates has said they built their growth was through podcasting, which is now thrown off the traditional media of the traditional way. As a candidate, you would go on to ABC, CBS doing it. But now what they found is podcasting is like, where were they getting their voices? When you hear what Joe Rogan and his 30 million plus followers and all these different things, what have you envisioned where podcasts is? And maybe why do you think doctors should be starting involved in creating podcasts?
So I think that it is a unique thing. And nowadays, I think there are really only two routes to go, right? I think that video and audio are fundamentally helpful to being successful. And I like audio better for physicians, to be honest with you. And the reason why is because doctors are busy. They're going to be listening to podcasts when they're driving in the car, when they're working out. Maybe they're doing some household chores in their time off when they're trying to do other things. Whereas video requires you to sit down and watch something and be captivated by that. And you can't be doing other things while you're doing it. And so from my experience, it's a uniquely beneficial thing that people can listen to while they're doing other things. And it doesn't encroach on your time. And so you have these, which is crazy to me. You talk about Joe Rogan and like long form podcasts. Like I've never done that. Mike, you seem like the kind of guy that might be able to pull that off, but 2 to 3 hour episodes. And I'm like, how do people have time to listen to a 3-hour show that comes out all the time? And so that said, it is a platform where people can get to know you, right? You feel like you know someone better if you hear their voice, if you hear their story, if you hear the passion with which they speak. And so because of that, I think podcast is uniquely formatted to reach other doctors and to reach the audiences that doctors might have.
Yeah. And we've seen this with doctors who are not only using it for their own practice, using it. Obviously, that's one way where you have a local podcast and you're attracting new audiences. Maybe they're trying to build their brand. I know I work with doctors who want to get on speaking engagements and have some media attention. And it's a low cost way of actually getting their voices heard. We have doctors who want to be coaches and consultants and do other non-clinical activities. But I think one of the reasons why we came together to start what it's called the Doctors Podcast Network is we're seeing a lot of doctors have trouble starting up their own podcasts. Maybe you guys can share maybe some of your early stories of trying to start it on your own. And as Brad, you had mentioned, you had some obstacles along the way to get you to where you are today.
Yeah. So I had been thinking about doing a podcast even though I started in 2018, a long time ago, I'd been thinking about doing it for a couple of years. And there was the analysis paralysis that all physicians go through with everything, because if we're going to do something, we're going to do it well. We're just not just going to produce some ramshackle thing. We're going to get a good mic. We're going to get good recording software. And so I didn't do anything. I just thought about it for a while. And then I had to speak to my wife about it. And one of her good friends is a professional voiceover artist. And so the first bunch of episodes of my show, she edited. She, like, for no cost whatsoever, out of the goodness of her heart, edited like a lot of episodes for me. And at the beginning, I was doing it every other week, but I was enjoying it so much. And there was so much material that I wanted to cover that every other week wasn't enough. So I wanted to do it every week. But at that point, now I had a mic, now I had a webcam, And I had set up, I was using Zoom at the time, and it wasn't very hard, but the editing was like the big piece there that I never, and 400 plus episodes, I've still never edited my own episode. And so
if you whisper it, nobody's going to hear, friend.
So I know there are some podcasters that do that. They do edit their own episode, but for me, it was like a huge barrier. And so eventually I found other people to then take that off my hands. But it was like, there were like a few barriers there that I never would have pulled the trigger if the bar hadn't been lowered by services available or people I knew, something like that. And so once I got going, then I realized that I enjoyed it so much, and then everything just exploded from there.
Yeah, I'll say I've done both. I've edited my own show. I have handed it off to other people multiple times. And one of the things that is most important to physicians is time, right? And trying to figure out, and I'm a big believer in outsourcing things that you don't enjoy. So like I've to be honest with you, I'm a content creator. It's what provides lots of satisfaction in my life. And so I've spent time to edit podcasts and to understand what that process takes. And to do it well, it takes a significant amount of time. And so that's led me naturally to hand it off at other times. And so that process is a learning curve that takes a substantial amount of time to learn how to edit things. And so why do that? It's just an extra hurdle, an extra barrier to get started. It's one of the things people listen to and they're like, I'd love to get behind a microphone and talk about XYZ topic, but I'm not going to because I don't know which platform to use. I don't know which editing company to have edit my stuff. I don't know how to get started on which microphone to choose. And by the way, I wish I had a picture, and maybe I can find one, of the before, like when Jimmy started podcasting, and this massive setup I have in front of me right now from like podcasting 4 years later, with my 3 screens and a teleprompter I'm looking into, which makes it look like I'm looking at you, but I'm actually looking at a teleprompter. And so it can be as fancy as that, or it can just be like, hey, you plug in a USB microphone, but which one do you use? And how do you edit it? And how do you, have a boom stand so when you hit the microphone, it doesn't make a noise. And so all of those things can be hurdles. And if someone's there just to point out, hey, the step-by-step checklist, this is how we do this, this is how we go, this is how we edit the podcast, get things out that would have got me going a lot sooner than I did originally, because I saw all those obstacles initially and it made me hesitant.
Yeah, I started off recording in a closet just because I heard that the audio was better there because it absorbs the reverb is absorbed by the clothes and embedded journalists.
Just clothes like on your head as you're recording this show.
Exactly. That definitely happened.
So Bradley has come out of the closet now.
I am out of the closet.
Indeed. So, I think so.
So you had these hurdles, and you talking with other doctors that they were also having similar, not just doctors, other healthcare professionals. A lot of people are busy, but let's talk about this Doctors Podcast Network. Let's talk about it. Maybe how did it get started and why we're launching it and why we decided to come together to do it. So Bradley, I'll let you take this question because you're really the one who brought this all together.
So it's formed by pain points, right? What were our pain points when we started podcasting and as we've continued podcasting, as we continue to do it? Like Jimmy said, our time as physicians is very valuable and very limited. And so it should be spent doing those things that are of high value, not the things that are not. And I thought, listen, if I have these pain points as a podcaster, I'm sure other physicians do. And so I got together a couple of people that are in my network that I built through podcasting, right? So you guys have each been on my show and that's how I know you, right? Mike, we met in person once, but that was after we've started building this. Jimmy, we've never met in person. And
it'd be really disappointing. So it's good that we haven't.
And I think good businesses are built by solving problems. And these are problems that we've had and we have answers to now from all the experience that we have and the very varied experiences, right? We all have different reasons for why we've started our shows, why we continue doing so, and ways that we've overcome those pain points. And if we have these problems, other people do. It's the same reason I started my podcast to begin with. Like, I have these questions. If I have these questions, I'm sure other doctors have these questions. And so they'd like to hear the answers. So I record them and put the content out there. So we're solving for problems that we know are out there and we can help people with. And we want to lighten the load from physicians. We want to make their lives easier. We want to make their lives more enjoyable by the connections that they make through content, by building something through building their personal and professional brand. And so we've had such satisfaction through our journeys. We want to lower the bar to entry for other physicians. And that was the impetus for the network. And so I called up these two people that I knew were experts in building this and said, hey, would you be interested in this? And both of you said, no, not at all. Not even, no, I'm just kidding. Both said, resounding yes. I think this is a really good idea.
Contacted us before you got to us, because I think we were 8th and 9th, I think, on your list, wasn't it?
We weren't going to share that publicly, Mike. You're supposed to keep that off the recording.
And there's a fourth person to this who hasn't been mentioned yet, and her name is Desiree Leos, and she has been working in this very specific niche of physician to physician podcast for years. She knows so many of the big players in the space and has worked with them and helped them grow their businesses and their podcasts. And so I had known her for a long time, but never worked with her until the last couple of years. And now I have the privilege of doing that. And so she's the one who's really helping us run the show.
Yeah. So I have a different experience because Desiree got my very first show off the ground. From soup to nuts, I think Desiree has been on the ride with Money Meets Medicine. And then I branched out and started the Physician Philosopher. I actually had 2 podcasts at one point, which, to your point, like there's lots of different styles of podcasting. And Desiree helped me set up both. The Physician Philosopher's complete solo episode. I don't know why thousands of people want to listen to me drone on just by myself, but that was a thing for a year and a half. And then Money Meets Medicine's always been a co-hosted show. So 2 people and organizing that and the frameworks and the details and how to get started and get things uploaded to all the different podcast playing places. But Desiree's been in this space for a really long time, and she just doesn't like microphones or cameras. And so she's behind the scenes right now watching us as we record this. But Desiree is amazing.
So Doctors Podcast Network is set to launch
soon
on there. And we have a link. If you are a physician who has a podcast right now, we'd love to get in contact with you. If you're first getting started with it, we'd like to hear from you as well. What is the link where they can go to find out more information about this?
So just to build on that, it's for if you have an established podcast and you want to work with us, awesome. If you're thinking about podcasting and you need help launching, same. Like both of those types of people can work with us. And so they're going to go to drpodcastnetwork.co. It's drpodcastnetwork.co, and it'll ask you for your email address so you can be on all of the updates as we're building this.
To be clear, that's .co, not .com.
.co, yeah. I think Elon owns the .com, but that's okay. We're going to negotiate. In terms of some of the pain points you had mentioned, obviously getting out the podcast, maybe the technological aspects of it. But what are the ways that you foresee Dr. Podcast Network can help that lone podcaster out there?
Yeah, so I think one of the best ways for me, because of what I mentioned earlier with the importance of time, that is the only thing in your life that has the most limited, resource to it is time. And so the ability to help doctors get started from A to Z, and then to have, depending on what they're looking for, if you want to launch from the very beginning, that's great. If you want to have a completely hands-off show where you literally show up like Brad does and you hit record and then do nothing else, not saying that's not important, Brad, but that's what Brad does, you can have that experience. If you want to have not quite the complete full white glove experience and you want just a little bit of help in terms of editing and getting things uploaded, we can also help you with that. And so for me, it's the offer and the value of giving you your time back. You still get the community, you still get the chance to share ideas and to meet other people and to hit record about things that are really important to you that you want to share with the world, but it doesn't have to take up 20 hours a week of your time. It could just take up to, a couple, just to do a little research, hit record, or it could take 30 minutes because Mike just shows up and he's amazing at thinking on the fly. So he just hits record and like, how do you prep? He's bam, let's do this.
And then there's also the community, right? We have a Facebook community for members of the network, and you guys are going to have questions, and you'll be able to get those questions answered by veterans in the space, by us and by other members. There's a huge value to that community because as these little questions pop up, you can either ask ChatGPT and maybe it says hallucinate, but just to be more medical about it, it's confabulating. It's not hallucinating. I won't give up on that point. And maybe you'll get the right answer, but whereas if you ask people with lots of experience in this very specific space we're in, you're going to get a lot of good answers.
Yeah, and goes through the power too. It was like where podcasting is going, and I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts. But it's like when I work with a client and they're like, I want to get my name out there. what's the best way to do it? What's the most economic way? I go, if you've got $10 million and you can buy a Super Bowl commercial, go for it. Most of us don't have that. And then I said, the way to get your name out there that's cost effective and can grow is podcasting. I've seen it again and again. I've seen people who've got no following out there. Suddenly they're getting these big clients, or they're getting clients. I've seen again, I know, Jimmy, you've seen the same thing. They're building their practices. And I always go back to podcasting. So
Yeah.
Where do you guys see like where podcasting is going, since you guys are entrenched into it? What have you seen, or where do you think that the trends are going into this area?
So Mike, I want to piggyback off that last comment, and then I can answer that one too. But it's really measurable when you look at social media. You're like, oh, somebody has 15,000 followers, or they've got 100,000 people on Instagram. And it's very measurable in that way. But what I found with podcasting is that you tend to, because when people get in this, they're like, hey, I've got 200 downloads, or I've got 400 downloads. Like, those are 200 to 400 people that are showing up every week to listen to you talk. And they're going to be infinitely more engaged and wanting to be a part of your community and meaningful in terms of who you're impacting than one of your people that follows on Instagram. And so I think that podcasting has a very real impact on how you can engage with people in a way that's very different. When you hear someone's ears, you don't hear people's ears, by the way. When you hear someone else's voice in your ears, you get to know them. You get to know the personality and the self-deprecating humor that is Jimmy. But yeah, you get to know people. And that is a way for people to know and to trust you. To your point, Mike, when you're building businesses, people want to know who they want to work with. They want to know who's going to help them. They want to know who's going to be authentic and do the right thing. And one of the best ways to do that is to get to know people. And podcasting does a great job of that. So for me, I just see podcasting continuing to get bigger and bigger, which I think is an important point, because sometimes one of the things that will prevent people from stepping into this space is they have this idea that it's oversaturated, that they don't need to have their voice out there. And I always tell people that's not really a thing. There's no one out there that has your story or your perspective or your paradigm or narrative on whatever topic you're looking to talk about. And so I only see this growing, and anyone that listens to podcasts knows you've probably listened to more than one. And so I think that it is a much more engaging way than social media. It is more impactful. People that listen often act, and it is something that I don't see going away personally.
Awesome. Bradley, what are your thoughts?
So to build on that, right? Like when you have a podcast, you build yourself as a brand expert in whatever it is you're speaking about, right? Like for Jimmy to be able to pick up a microphone and talk about these topics and have his solo episodes, like clearly he has to be knowledgeable to be able to speak as he does in a knowledgeable way. So he establishes himself as an expert in that space. So there's that. The other aspect of it is the interview style shows where it's networking. It's a great opportunity to network. So if you're building your brand, you're doing that, whether it's interviews or solo episodes, and then growing your network by inviting adjacent people onto your show and they're instantly a part of your network, because it is a very intimate experience, right? As Jimmy said about the listeners, like you're in their ears. That is a very intimate space to be in. And then conducting an interview with someone over half an hour, most of us are not doing those 2 to 3 hour episodes, whatever time period you're doing it in. You're really, one, you're picking their brain for yourself, but two, now they're a part of your network. So whether you come to them 6 months later or a year later, or they come to you, you're building your network and you're building your brand at the same time.
Yeah. I really can't say the power of networking, and I don't really understate it. I've had people who are clients with, I signed up with you because I've been listening to you for years, which is out of the blue. So you never know. And it's not just me, you're having a business. It's about, if you want to have your voice out there, if you've got a movement, if you have a nonprofit out there, there's so many ways through this tanglement of all this marketing stuff, all these messages that we get. Imagine here in Southern California, where you got commutes that are an hour and a half long. You've got a person listening to your podcast during that 60 to 90 minutes during the commute time. I mean, talk about getting a captive audience. And that's where I really think the power of podcasting really comes about. Guys, I know you guys are busy, but I thank you guys for coming on to call. If my listeners, if you guys are starting a podcast or have a podcast right now and want to connect with other physicians, you need to go to this link, drpodcastnetwork.co, drpodcastnetwork.co. Sign up. They'll get you on our waiting list. We'll let you know when everything is open. We've got so many things behind the scenes that we're doing. I'm super excited that we're bringing about that we can talk about on the show. but I know you guys will want to hear about all that. Guys, this has been wonderful. Any last minute thoughts before we end the call today?
Just clearly we're preaching to the choir here because we're all big believers in podcasting, but I think there need to be more physician voices out there, right? Like we are all experts in our particular spaces, and I'm sure other spaces as well. And it's a really enjoyable experience. I actually had a podcast episode recently where I invited my wife to share the mic with me. She's a non-physician, and she goes, "Oh, wow, now I totally get why you spend so much time in the basement behind the stairs, which is where I record." Like it was just what she was like, "I totally get it now." It is really fun, and it's very satisfying and great for building your brand, building your network. Come join us.
I agree with all the things that you both said.
All right, Bradley. Now we're tracking like every place in your house where you're actually going from. You got the closet, you got under the stairs.
Seeing the whole space.
I'm in my basement too, by the way, so it must be like a thing.
All right, guys. This has been great. Again, guys, check it out, the Doctor Podcast Network. Here with my colleagues, Bradley Block, Jimmy Turner. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to being on this, listening and getting your wisdom. And thank you, the audience. Thanks for listening. As always, we're going to have ups and downs in our entrepreneur life. Do something a little each day to bring you closer to your goals and keep moving you forward.